Well, hello, everyone. My name is George Harris, Curator and Artistic Director at Two Rivers Gallery. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this artist talk with Aileen Bahmanipour. Well, hello, everyone. My name is George Harris, Curator and very pleased to welcome you to this artist talk with Aileen Bahmanipour. Well, hello, everyone. My name is George Harris. Sorry, we have a funny echo. Pleased to welcome you to this artist talk with Aileen Bahmanipour. Well, hello, everyone. My name is George Harris. Sorry, we have a funny echo. Pleased to welcome you to this artist talk with Aileen Bahmanipour. Well, hello, everyone. My name is George Harris. Sorry, we have a funny echo. Pleased to welcome you to this artist talk with Aileen Bahmanipour. Well, hello, everyone. My name. Let me. I think there seems to be an issue here. We have an echo. Yeah. Okay. We'll see if we can figure this out. Sorry, just one sec. Okay, we'll try this again and see if this works. Technology, it makes our lives gloriously wonderful and simple. Anyway, hello. Are we, can everyone hear me? Aileen, can you hear me? All right, excellent. Well, Aileen, we are very glad to be able to welcome you to this now no longer endlessly repeating artist talk. I I want to begin by acknowledging that we are streaming this talk from the traditional unceded territory of the Clately Tenay. And as a settler, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to raise a family, to live, work, and to learn on these lands. Aileen Bahmanipour is one of 8 artists whose work is included on our current exhibition, Immigration, A Conversation. This exhibition closes on Sunday, so please take some time to visit or revisit the exhibition if you can. Just a couple of quick notes. This evening's talk is being captioned by Callie Morrison with the Island Deaf and Hard of Hearing Centre. Thank you, Callie, for helping us out tonight. We're expecting a program about 45 minutes or so, and towards the end, there will be some time for questions after Eileen's talk. If you do have any questions, we'd love for you to type them into the Facebook live chat stream. Kate Hurley, who is online with us, will read them out for us. Aileen has recently moved to Bella Coola, but is joining us this evening from Vancouver, as well as being an artist. She is an art instructor and she works with Emily Carr in their continuing studies program. Aileen, of course, is in the current exhibition, and as you will see imminently, she's responsible for some truly remarkable work. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you this evening Aileen Bahmanipour. Aileen, welcome.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. This is lovely to be among the groups of my friends, people I can see them, and also people who I don't see them from here, from Zoom. And without any further notice, I do want to share my screen and start my talk. And thank to George, Kali, and Kate for hosting this event tonight and be with me to share some of the aspect of the work. I do want to acknowledge the land that I'm living on and also the situation I'm living in. So I'm joining you via Zoom from Vancouver, the traditional territories of Coast Salish people, Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish and Musqueam speaking people. I do want to also acknowledge what's happening in Iran at the time that I'm delivering this talk. I've never been that proud of my identity and the historical time and place that I'm living at. The work that I want to talk about has a lot to do with Iran, the way that I experienced the life there and here. So it's important for me to really take your attention, have your attention to the very specific situation that we are dealing with for basic human rights. I thought to organize my thoughts and what I want to share with you today into some questions and into two categories. Um, so maybe we start from why this work titles defense mechanism that is installed into reverse gallery for the current shows look like that. Why diagrams, why working on transparent material, why falling diagrams and collapsing forms. And the other layer that I want to talk about is about the idea that why I'm using these specific diagrams, specifically diagrams of missiles and landing wheels of airplane, and why I'm working with this idea of the catastrophe as a self-defense mechanism with quite indirect reference to the flight PS 752. So for most of us, this page is familiar, but if you don't know about this page, I do want to translate it to you in the best way possible. So I'm interested in the way that politics come to us in a form. And at the same time, I'm interested in politics of forms and the affordances of the form. The page that you see is a page that in 2009, during the Green Movement, if you were in Iran and if you were trying to connect to internet, that was the page that you would see most of the time. It's a filter page. During that time, the government wanted to disconnect any form of connectivity among the citizen and also disturb the flow of the information. So blocking the internet was one strategy. And so again, regardless of what you search on the Google, that would have been the page that you would see that categorized your information that you have access to into 8 categories. That, for example, if you're looking for information about social topics, scientific information, investment and work, entertainment, news, these are the options that you have to have access information, yet you are not allowed to get the actual answer to your question. So during this time, I was interested in the forms that were available to me. But before kind of going to what happened through the internet and online information, I was working with some established narratives, right? There is a very famous book, Shahnameh, that it's been worked on it during different times and different history of Iran. It's a book about mythical history and also epical history and literature of Iran. This image is quite important for me. This miniature is coming from one specific version of Shahnameh. It's from 15th century. So there is a revolution has happened. The soldier, the rebellions are taking the king down. The king hasn't fallen yet. He's falling. There's something really interesting in this image. Part of it, I'm conscious about it, and part of it is like, I don't know yet why I'm so struck by this image for many, many years yet. Maybe because of this image and the repetition of this mythical, at the same time epical literature about kind of revolution and rebellious and taking the power down, I was interested in Shahnameh and in specific in one myth of Shahnameh. The myth talks about a king. His name is Zahak. Zahak becomes the king of Iran by the help of devil. The devil changes his character and the actual body. So when Zahak becomes the king, the devil goes into the body of the chef, cooks Zahak lots of delicious food. Zahak asks the chef that you're doing very well. Ask any wishes that you have and I make them happen for you. And the devil / chef asks to kiss shoulders of the king. And after that, two snakes grow up from Zahok's shoulders. Zahok freaks out, doesn't know what to do, is afraid of getting bitten by the snakes, and look for doctors to cure his snakes. And this time the devil comes into the body of a doctor and prescribe him to kill two young people of his country and make a meal out of their brain and feed the snakes with their brains. So basically, Zahok is sacrificing the thinking power of a society to feed his fears. So this narrative was quite strong yet. It belongs to centuries ago, but it really speaks to me, at least until now. So instead of working directly with this narrative of Zahok and snake, this kind of figure in the body of snakes was quite interesting for me. That kind of renew itself, it changes its skin, but kind of create these loops of torture. It's a system that tortures itself, it damages itself. It's a self-destructive system. So I'm working with this figure of the snake, but with a direct reference to the form and aesthetics of Persian miniatures. And still I'm working with this figure of a falling body that is falling, doesn't have a head, can't really think, it's not really alive, but it's not fully dead yet. Working with this idea of transparency yet, which inform my next works. So back to that idea of like internet and what was happening on internet in 2009. And when I was facing this filter page, by accident, I found that when I Google for diagram of things, I see that filter page less, and also the number of images that comes up on Google image was more. That simple. And that was quite interesting for me. Why is that? Why, if I search for the actual name, that thing could get filtered, but if I search for the diagram of that thing, I still could see some images. So as I was working with this narrative of Zahok and the snake and stuff, I was kind of interested into narrativity or the narrative quality of such diagrams, that they are transparent. They try to show us how a system works within inside. They try to be transparent, and there is a narrativity into it. They try to tell us as much as possible about how a system works within inside. Hide as less as possible. Everything needs to be seen and explained. In some of them, there is this steps and graduation and the process of something. As you could notice, even through these examples that I chose, these are quite figurative and explanatory diagram. So I kind of was interested into them. So in a situation that I couldn't really critique the system or institution, and I didn't have my own language to use it, I could use established language, whatever is available for me to create a narrativity, to critique a system. So that's how I started working, not only with this mechanical diagram, machining diagram, but also working with this idea of the transparency that in a few years ago, I was trying to represent it, to paint or draw something that looks transparent. Yet in 2016, I thought that I could use directly on a transparent material. So I'm exploring this material and what it can afford to me as not only as a material, but as a form. Trying to folding it. And during this time, I was working as a gesture of a scientist or an inventor who's making this pattern file of machine and system that they don't really work very well. Something is wrong with them. They're about to explode. They're leaking. Something is definitely wrong with them, but I'm kind of folding it. Still, the image is transparent, but I'm not really revealing everything to you. Show it, but not really showing it. And the layering create mostly a lot of noise. Something that I was also following during these works and working with transparency was the idea of image and ground of the image, and this gesture of iconoclast or image breaker. During the history of human mark making, so be it on the walls of a cave or walls of a building or paper or wood panel, canvas, image, it's always covering and suppressing this ground of the image and silence it. And I'm interested into examples of the times that, let's say, a revolution has happened and the new regime tries to disturb and damage whatever is left from the previous regime by damaging the images. So you could see pieces of the wall or pieces of the paper, the materiality of that image. And that ground of the image could find a language to be part of the image. In that case, the image and the ground of the image become inseparable. And that's quite interesting for me. I see it as a liberty. I kind of celebrate it when that happens. And I try to experiment with that connection, see how can I explore that connection, relationship between image and ground of the image in my work. So the folding of transparency gives that to me. I couldn't really say which part is top or back of the image. It's like everything is intertwined to each other. And it was in 2018 when I graduated from MFA program at UBC. So the final project was me stitching all the drawings, mechanical drawings that I've done in 2 years, stitch them together, kind of crumble it. So again, thinking about this gesture of image breaker person who's done with established images and representation, yet doesn't have a language of her own to create a new image, to start a new system of representation. But that disturbance could create something, maybe a new meaning through the already established language. And I was also working with this idea of paper making, because the ground of image and its connection with the image was interesting for me. And paper in that case is quite important material. And I was thinking, what could be the worst thing that could happen for a paper? As the job of the paper is to be a perfect platform, an ideal surface for things to be written on, for things to be read on it, for things to be drawn on it. So it's to get dirty or messy, or we don't want anything inside the paper to make, let's say, a text or image illegible on it. So through this work, I decided to have the human hair as inclusion within the paper. I was interested into the aesthetics of it, the form of it, which is close to my tracing or repetition of mechanical drawings, but also was thinking about, again, this relationship of the image and ground of the image, this figure and its surface. And from these works, I got into this idea of like manuals as another objects that the companies, maybe a diagram, to do this job of explanation, to give us this knowledge that we don't have necessarily, to how to work with a system or a machine. manuals also supposed to be transparent and reliable as a source of knowledge to tell us how to work with the system. And yet the manuals that I'm trying to make, it's illegible. There is nothing to be read on, but mostly it's like how it feels, how we feel like to read such manual. Even the idea of like reading or writing as a transparent source of knowledge, maybe. So these ideas came to me after working with this material of paper and hair and kind of thinking through this idea of manual. This is a still image of a video piece for 2018 that similar exploration that I had with image and ground of the image. I was kind of interested into exploring through video. I didn't make the video. It was a footage of a conference that someone from Africa is talking about the revolution that's happening at their time and talk about the demand of the new generation of their society. Aside from the talk, I was really interested and into the sign language interpreter at the corner of the video that was going on, and the gesture of that language along with that context that was delivering to me was quite interesting. And at the same time, when I was working on this illegibility of manuals and working with the system, I was quite interested into my own incapability of understanding certain languages and how some catastrophe could be untranslatable. This lack of language to really be able to translate a catastrophe. So these are the ideas that was subjecting me at that time until 2019 that I worked on an installation project with the title of How to Invest in Iran in 2019. And that was the exact sentence and question that I searched on internet, on Google Image. And interestingly enough, one of the explanatory diagrams that came to me as a result of my question was the diagram of milling machine, a machine that is capable of drilling into different surfaces. And that was quite interesting to me. So I started working with this diagram and narrativity around it. What does it mean as an answer to my question? I was imagining a diagram that is constantly in the notion of falling. It's very unstable, wobbly, fragile, collapsible. And that was how I made my decision to install these pieces. The diagrams are how I create these diagrams. These are like actual diagrams that I printed from Google Image. I'm interested into the gesture of the hands, the image of the hand working with the machine. I repeat that gesture a little bit in the diagrams and render them on plexiglass pieces. And for the installation, I nail a few of them on the wall, but the rest of them, they're kind of interlock into each other. If someone passed by this installation, the whole thing may wobble a little bit, and some pieces have fell from it, and that's okay. I created a manual with 4 chapters, a video performance, and a diagram for how to invest in Iran and a transparency, which I will back to it. So for the manual has 4 chapters. For the last chapter, I try to read the manual. I can't get a sense of it in relation to the diagram. So I put some of the pages back to the bucket of water, make a pulp, and I start to make the last chapter right in front of the diagram, try to follow the diagram. So it's a reading table, so people could handle the paper and go flip through them. So for the first chapter, These are the actual diagrams of milling machine and parts related to the milling machine. The material of the paper making is abaca. Abaca is a plant-based material that allowed me to create a semi-transparent paper. So through the process of paper making, I created a very thin layer of abaca paper. I have this cutout of the diagrams, folded them, put them on top, and a second layer of abaca paper on top. So the diagrams, the folded diagrams, are sandwiched between two layers of the paper and press them. And in the end is one sheet of paper that has a folded diagram inside of it. That's why you can see black and white. It's because it's folded. Chapter 2, I'm not sure if I have the image of it. Chapter 2 is 3 color of the thread, black, red, and white, that it's 1 meter. It's very kind of direct reference to the art history of Marcel Duchamp when he was talking about critique of logic and this new measuring system that it's absolutely illogical. Drop it from a distance, and however it falls on the paper, I fixed it, and I kind of recall it as a diagram. The third chapter is a chapter that the gravity helped me to make it. Is the pressure of the gravity. On transparency, that's how I could create these marks that actually looks scientific to me, more like biological, maybe images we could see under microscope. So again, this idea of like bad paper, but what would be the affordance of the bad paper? What does it can do for me? And this is the last chapter that I made it through the video performance. It's quite chewed up. It's all used up. It has quality of an object, and something is like speed out. There is nothing left into it. There is as a manual to be read on or understand. Later on, I kind of came back to this project and get rid of all the negative spaces, and whatever I did to the diagrams, the cutout of the diagrams, I did it to my own drawings of these pattern files that just wanted to cut out the raw diagrams. And instead of thinking about the quite neat way of folding the piece, I was more interested into making a knot with these diagrams. So, and following this process, it was inevitable for me to not explore them in this space. And again, I'm thinking about this installation of a diagram that constantly is falling. It's this notion of constant falling. Thinking about different way that I could explore it on the space, on the wall. And at that time, like now I'm working directly with this diagram of missiles, and probably a little bit imaginary, maybe cartoonist a little bit, these missiles that Iran was very kind of proud of making them as a defense mechanism, as a defense weapon, and sell it to other countries. And that was the time that 2020, the catastrophe of the flight 752 happened. And the government mentioned it as a defense mechanism, that they had to do it to prevent something worse to happen. And at that time, on the other hand, the international were talking about negotiating with Iran around the nuclear power, etc. And the whole thing was just absolute nonsense to me. So these are some designs of some missiles as a self-defense mechanism, that they are just shooting blood. They're working with the blood. Blood is their motivating power, is their source of energy. So I'm working with these diagrams. And these are the installation of the pieces at Two Rivers Gallery. And to explain about the other piece that's installed with this body of the works, I want to take you to a different project that I made before this installation. And that was my direct collaboration with this space. It was a site-specific installation in a residency, which was an old building, it used to be a school, but after the Second World War, it repurposed for an art residency place. So for creating this very long manual about how to ring a bell. And at that time, my question was to when, as an artist, I should stop the work. What if I take that decision making away from myself, that I won't be the person, I won't be in charge to decide when the work needs to be end. And instead, it's like, this is my material that decide when the work should be finished. So I continued this drawing of the manual of the hand pulling the rope until my role ends. And the other thing I was thinking about, the idea of narrativity and what creates a narrative. And if repetition of figure over and over and over and again, is that something that could disturb a narrative, because it creates a pattern, and pattern is not necessarily a narrative. So I was thinking about, I was questioning it. So the manual is quite long. It goes all the way up to the 4th floor, and from the 4th floor is my studio, and from the window it drops down from the other side. There is an animation happening in my studio. I'm not sure if I have a video of it. Yes. So it gets to the point that when I was looking at the manual, I wasn't sure if this is a hand pulling the rope, is this the rope pulling the hand, if someone's trying to escape from the space. So all these different narratives actually enters the work, which is quite interesting for me. So that's the other side. You could see the manual from outside. And part of it, again, unconsciously, I draw to this idea of falling and verticality. And I think this is a video. So after this experience, for me was easy to kind of imagine something quite vertical in a space and have a reason for it. So just comparing this idea of like how I kind of get rid of this notion of decision making, or when to stop the work. These are a series of the work that I, as an artist, decide to where to end the work, and working with this idea of not making, and kind of working with this small scale of the space as a box. Yet this is the work about repetition of landing wheels of airplane that I'm not in charge of when to stop. My job is to just repeat that pattern over and over and again. It's the gear of landing wheels of airplane that it never lands. It just continues constantly, endless. I created this work during a 1-month residency at Griffin Art Project in North Vancouver. And at that time, even I couldn't see the work. It was impossible for me. So my job was to just repeat it. It was very mechanical, machine job to take it as a creative process. And it was a piece that I couldn't really see it in that space until I could install it in the space and in the Two River Gallery. And that was pretty much first time that I could actually see the work and kind of make it to work out with the diagrams of the missile. So I kind of want to end my talk on this slide, and I would be more than happy to have your questions.
Well, thank you, Aileen.
When I stop sharing.
I wonder, Kate, are there any questions in the feed?
I think our audience has been so captive with your wonderful talk that they haven't been able to come up with any questions. This is a good problem to have. I wonder though, I actually have a question myself, if you would indulge me. I'm wondering, you know how when you say a word over and over, it starts to lose meaning, and you start to think about it differently the more you say it. I wonder if you could kind of talk through how it feels to repeat these images over and over, and kind of like what you go through while you're making them.
There is a numbing sense into it, at least for me. It's like it goes both way. It could numb a concept, or after that numbness, I could reconnect to that concept or idea or thing in a new way, because it doesn't have that initial meaning or context to me anymore. So, and another thing about this repetition that might be somehow also soothing for me is about this idea of like tracing that comes with a dictation that I just follow, I just trace. I don't necessarily add anything or change anything on my side. My job is to just follow the order of tracing. So I approach it into different ways. But there is, through this, at the same time that, again, this repetition have this numbing sense into it, for me, it has a way to reconnect to something like a landing gear.
Thank you. I think there's somebody joining us on Zoom who has a hand up. Can you, hello, are you able to ask your question of Aileen?
I am trying to. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much, Aileen. I really enjoyed it. One thing that came to my mind, and I think knowing your practice quite well, and following you and kind of like seeing how it evolved, there's this thing, because you're a fascinating drawer, right? Like you're great, like you have this wonderful skill. And it seems like there is this desire of de-skilling, by kind of by tracing, or like, I know that, you could easily, draw that thing, but there is this sort of, sense of having a formula, or I would say, let's say that you, as if you kind of transforming yourself to a machine, or there's this desire to be a machine, right? What do you think about that? And there's that sense of de-skilling. I think that's interesting. Can you speak to that?
I think I could respond to your question through the way that I question my job, if I have a job as an artist. Like, what are the process of decision making, and what if I make that less and less and less? Where is the minimum point that I don't necessarily have to make the decision, but leave things based on other factors to decide for me? So it become more like collaboration, let's say, between me and material, collaboration between me and space. what could be the outcome of such collaboration. And these are the things that are quite fascinating for me now, to question my role as an artist and kind of dilute my kind of my authority in the work. So
in a way, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but kind of like, let's say like, well, Deleuze talks about like how writing, like the aim of the writing is in a way to become invisible. Would you feel like there's something in that you kind of consider like your acts of?
maybe the idea of, if I want to approach this invisibility of the drawing, is like, for me, drawing is not the destination anymore.
No, sorry, maybe I have to kind of, sorry to interrupt you, but
Mhm.
maybe like it's more like the becoming invisible through the act of drawing, so the artist becomes invisible, right? So I'm like, is there that kind of desire, or is that like something intentional? Because it seems like to me that like sort of like by wanting to limiting the decision making aspect of it, or there's like this desire to become less and less, like to have less and less agency in the work. Or maybe I'm wrong, please correct me.
It's kind of, it's more about making a space for other factors that could guide the work or decide for the works. And that's, again, that's something fascinating for me, because if I decide for everything, and I could predict the future of the work, from my side, there is a limitation into it. And I had experiences when I haven't done all the decision making, and again, I'm using the word collaboration with the space or other elements out of my control, that through that situation and environment, the way that by diluting my role as an artist, I could open a space and create an infrastructure and environment for other elements to play a role in the work. That was quite fascinating for me, how the work become beyond myself, stronger and much more smarter than me myself. And the way that the work kind of came back to me was quite fascinating. One reason is that maybe that I really want to use this idea of like collaboration with the space, and I don't necessarily need to know everything in advance, and a little bit of opacity and not knowing everything, it's something acceptable through my process.
So the idea of like having mastery, which I think you have mastery over the technique, so you want to kind of let go of that, right?
It might be this idea of let go, but I don't know if I want to use the word sacrifice, but I have to do it if I want to explore new things in the work, if I want to open a space for new things to happen in my work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Do we have any other questions? Kate, any questions in our live feed?
No questions from the live feed, but if anybody else who's joining us in Zoom has any questions, I'm sure we'd love to hear them. Oh, I think we have one in the chat that I can read out loud. Kaveh says, thank you for your evocative presentation, Aileen. You mentioned verticality and falling. My understanding is that, as you explain, your work has more to do with falling rather than surging, there being also vertical. It also seems to me that your work keeps the tension between materiality and dematerialization and the metaphoric interplay between opaque and transparent. I'm curious whether there is a link for you between falling as a unilateral process and materiality.
Good question.
That's a good question. I guess maybe that's the place that I'm very into collapsible forms and materials. And it has something to do with I think Mandana's questions, that how I'm not really willing to decide for everything. That collapsible material, it has its own agency, it has its own politics of form that I can rely on. I can work with it, but it's not like a drawing on a paper or solid material that I could cut and place and that's it. So I think the idea of verticality and involving this invisible power of gravity somehow in the work could play a role in that too. It can emphasize on the affordance of the form or material. That idea, if not falling, but these collapsible forms that cannot even hold itself. So that's something that's fascinating and also close to my ideas when it comes to critique of systems or systems that cannot hold themselves and they're not aware of that somehow.
Thank you. We're getting towards the outer limit of our time that we have, but still time for one more question or two if there are any more. So let me ask for a final time if there are any more questions for Aileen.
While we are waiting for more questions, I just wanted to do an announcement that Kava and I are working on a collaborative artist book. It's a publication of how to invest in Iran, the manual for it. The Gallery Gashet is helping us for publication of this project, and the entire installation, the project of how to invest in Iran, will be exhibited in Gallery Gashet end of this year.
Very nice. Thank you. Last call for questions. All right.
I think that's all for questions. So I think that might be a good place to wrap up.
All right.
Thank you so much, Aileen.
Yes, Aileen, thank you sincerely for your tremendously compelling talk. I need to thank Kate for intervening with all the questions. Thanks, Kate. And Kali, thank you too for captioning everything this evening. Of course, not least of all, thank you to all of you who have joined us either on Facebook Live or Zoom. That was a nice surprise to see some folks on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. Once again, Aileen, thank you for a very thought-provoking talk. It's a pleasure to learn some more about your work, and I thank you very much for sharing your time with us this evening. Please, all of you who haven't seen the exhibition yet, please do come and take a look before the end of the day on Sunday. It's really a fantastic exhibition that looks at immigration, and I think the range of perspectives in the exhibition really uphold, in a way, our promise of a conversation through the work. So thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Aileen. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kali. I bid you all a very good evening. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.